Our Jesus keeps company with all the wrong sorts, just all the wrong sorts. And this woman seems to be the wrong sort, but I'm not taking Simon's word for it.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of The Word Made Fresh, the weekly show where we look at upcoming narrative lectionary passages that are going to be preached here at Riverside and other places, maybe your place, and we talk about how we're going to explore them. This week, we're joined by, a guest preacher, Reverend Dr. John Thatamanil, who is the professor of theology and world religions across the street from Riverside at Union Theological Seminary. Dr. Thatamanil, you've got a couple books out, I think, right? The Imminent Divine, that might be on my shelf upstairs, actually. Circling the Elephant, and did I read on the Union's website that there's a third book coming as well?
Yeah, I'm working on a book tentatively titled Desiring Truth, Interreligious Wisdom for Our Post-Truth Crisis.
Whew. I think we're definitely going to need that book as a required reading in these next 4 years and beyond, but especially these next 4 years for sure.
I'm afraid so.
So, Dr. Thatamanil, we are grateful to have you make the long commute to the pulpit of the Riverside Church. How long does it take you to get from your apartment to the nave of the church?
About 4 minutes. When I lived across the street, I used to tell folks that the raindrops didn't have time to hit my head if it was raining outside, because all I had to do was walk out one door and go into those rotating doors. And just, it could be pouring, but I could just make that dash. Yeah.
The joy of, well, I mean, there's all sorts of ways to think about it, but there's a great joy in having that simple commute and living right where you work and having all those pieces of your life just connected, and the ease of dodging the raindrops.
Yes, and as I'll say, probably, depending on how long the sermon gets, I mean, just the joy of hearing the organ play, not just on Sunday mornings, but, I knew that what the organists were practicing for the next week, because they would be playing again and again, and it never got boring for me, because it was sort of like a musical, theological accompaniment throughout the week for the next week. So it was just gorgeous. Yeah.
You could track the rehearsal schedule. Oh, there's Alan on the organ again. I hear it.
That's right.
That's fun. That's fun. I wonder if you got familiar enough with the pieces to be like, oh, here comes the part that he needs to work on. Oh, he got it this time. Good work.
Not quite that familiar, but
yeah. Me neither, but enough to have a continued appreciation. That's lovely. Well, you'll hear the organ on Sunday. We're coming up, so this coming Sunday, the 23rd, and we have our text still in Luke. We use the narrative lectionary here at Riverside, Dr. Thatamanil, and right now we are just living in the book of Luke. We've been in Luke ever since the beginning of January, and we're going to be in Luke until the week after Easter. And this is a unique one because this is the third week where we're in the same chapter of Luke. So we're finishing up the entire chapter, and your text is Luke 7 verses 36 to 50, and this is the story of Jesus going to have some dinner, and then an unexpected guest shows up and crashes the party, it seems. Can you tell us a bit of what's going on in this text here, and then how you're thinking about exploring it for a sermon?
Absolutely. I think my first lesson, perhaps the lesson for all of us, and not the one I'm focusing on, is that you better be prepared for the unexpected if you invite Jesus over for dinner.
That seems to be true in every time people invite Jesus over. It's like, you don't know what this guy's going to do.
He's a package deal, and he brings along precisely the people who are marginalized and despised in the society. And so if you invite him, but you don't want to invite the company he keeps, you best rethink your invitation.
Whew, that's a sermon right there.
That's not the sermon for this time, but it will be mentioned. I'm profoundly suspicious of people who want Jesus, but not the company he keeps. I'm not sure that the Jesus they want is the one that we have in the Gospels. So,
the palatable Jesus, the Jesus in my image, the red hat wearing, gun toting, white American Jesus. Yeah.
Indeed. So, keeps company with all the wrong sorts, just all the wrong sorts. And this woman seems to be the wrong sort, but I'm not taking Simon's word for it. Just to be clear, right? The only person who calls her a sinner in this passage uh, is the elite dude, the one who has Jesus over. I mean, remember, there are passages when Jesus says to certain questionable women, "Go and sin no more." Say, for example, the woman caught in idolatry. He says nothing about go and sin no more to whatever this questionable woman, this so-called sinful woman is. So when a man tells me that a woman is a person of questionable standing, if I'm at all tutored by at least even a nominally feminist imagination, I ain't going to take his word for it. So yeah, these are lessons to be learned from the women we live with and love, and
Yeah.
it's one of the things my wife says: "Don't believe the man, John. Don't believe the man." But
Well, and I mean, and to jump ahead here, there's even the point when Jesus talks to Simon and he says, "Do you see this woman?" Which I love for not just the, technical staging of the play, but like existentially, Simon, do you even acknowledge her personhood? Do you see her? Do you recognize she is a full person, not just whatever archetype or stereotype you've already written her off as?
and the sin language only comes in his conversation with him.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he sort of seems to take his language on his terms,
Yeah.
and then not to her. And what does Jesus commend about her? And it's so poignant, right? This woman has not stopped kissing me since she appeared,
Yeah.
and you didn't even greet me with a kiss. And so, okay, look, first of all, a Jesus who wants to be kissed. Why don't we hear about that Jesus?
Yeah.
Right? This, we have our comfortable theologies of incarnation, but a God whose flesh wants to be kissed.
Mm.
Okay? So whatever kind of love that we think we ought to give to God,
Mm.
God says, give me a different kind of love.
Yeah.
Give me a scandalous love. Uh, Give me, dare I say it, an erotic love.
Mm.
Give me a love that includes a love for my body. Oh my God. So much of our Christianity would be less screwed up if we didn't try to leave the body out of it.
Yep.
She doesn't. I tell you, and I don't use this word unadvisedly, this is the most erotic passage in the New Testament.
Mm.
Uh, I don't need to create a feminist Jesus by saying, well, Jews treated women badly. That's just bad hermeneutics. But I don't know any time in any place in any culture in which a woman would not raise eyebrows if she began to kiss someone's feet, shed tears on them, and then proceed to wipe those feet with her hair.
Yeah.
This is a radical, boundary transgressing, intimate adoration. And I kind of wonder what Christian life would look like if that kind of love were possible for Christians. What if
Yeah.
we took her as our model and not
Oh, it
some
would.
kind of cleaned up, housebroken, well behaved, orderly love?
Yeah.
Yeah. So
It would redefine a few things for sure. It would make us. Augustine might get squirmish when he joins this conversation, and rightfully so. He seems to have made enough of an imprint on too many Christian imaginations or lack thereof. But when we actually allow ourselves permission to see the text like it presents itself, it exposes exactly what you're saying. What if we actually thought about Jesus and love in this particular way?
well, Augustine is actually one of my heroes on this, surprisingly.
Uh-oh, okay. Take me to school, Doc. All right, what's going on?
Well, if you begin to read the Confessions, he asks this critical question: what do I love when I love my God? And is it love of limbs, such as the body loves with an embrace? Is it a fragrance of a certain sort? I'm, doing this from memory, yeah. And he says, no, that's not it. And yet I do love an embrace, and I do love a fragrance of a sort, and a light of that shines in myself, in my inner self, a food that I eat, but I'm never satiated. So, I mean, it is powerfully erotic. That man longs for God. Now, of course, he thinks that his longing for God and longing for bodies have to be in some kind of zero-sum game. He got that completely wrong. But I don't know anybody who writes at his best a more erotic theological line, in that deep sense of all my desires, and I think Jesus says, love the Lord your God with not just soul and mind, but love with all your strength.
Yeah.
And the strength is in the body. You can't love God with all your strength and somehow think embodied love.
Yeah, you're gonna be out of breath if you're loving God with all your strength, and if you're not, you might not be doing it fully or right.
Yeah, and so there's something about this passage in the New Testament that says that the love of God can be and must be a kind of scandalous love that disregards the boundaries we erect that keep people in their place. And I don't actually think that without this kind of scandalous love, we can be nonconformists. So, I mean, y'all, right? This last week we had a pretend theologian named J.D. Vance cite this notion of ordo amoris, the order of love. And he said that in the Christian gospel, he said that orderly love, the order of love, which is also a bad translation on his part, I would imagine. And by the way, the Pope just wrote a letter scolding him about this. But his orderly love he says, this is the way Christian love has to operate. Again, I don't have the passage in front of me, but you first love your family, then you love your neighbor, then people in your in your country, and then you expand out. So proper orderly love is an expanding series of concentric circles, but you love those closest to you, those most like you, first, and then only the others, and then only as the heart has room left. And I think this is absolutely absurd. Thankfully, Papa Francis agrees with me. So, that's something. So, yeah.
And I think Pope Francis even clearly says to J.D. Vance, you should probably reflect on the parable of the Good Samaritan to really figure this out, which is a clear Sunday School 101. Yeah, love your neighbor. Who's my neighbor? Your neighbor is not the person you get along with or live with in that story. It's the exact opposite. And yeah, it's not every day that the Pope will issue a statement of that regard and that direct on current U.S. politics. But was a good hot take.
Paragraph 6 of Pope Francis's letter. The theologian has to know this by paragraph. But this is what a scandalous love does. A scandalous love says, I'm tempted to use, scandalous vocabulary. Screw that kind of conception of well-behaved love. Jesus does not want me to love in a well-behaved way.
Yeah.
And a scandalous love is the only thing that's going to set my imagination free from the way in which my imagination is corrupted and housebroken, and tells me, here are the right people to love. And here are the people you should love first.
And here are the right ways to love. Make sure it's done in my definition or my understanding of, I'm thinking of just, here we are in February, Black History Month, thinking of the halftime show at the Super Bowl where we saw an array of black artists performing. You know, who's going to tell these artists how to be themselves but themselves? And it's the sense of love on display, authenticity on display. How does it not just get put into a Hallmark card and packaged the way capitalism wants it, but how does it actually exhibit itself like you're describing here?
Yeah, I mean, this is a strange, erotic, queer. There's no categories for a woman who starts weeping on my feet, and what would happen of me? I would lose my.
Not to mention, we haven't even talked about how much did that alabaster jar cost. And at
Yeah,
least from
yeah.
my understanding, it's roughly a year's salary, 300 denarii. So that's a good chunk of change. Imagine what you make in a year and spend that on perfume and then pour it over some guy's feet at a dinner party you just crashed. This is not the picture you'd be used to seeing in current society or any time in history for that matter.
Indeed, and it leads me to ask, what would happen to me if I met infinite love become finite flesh? What would happen to me if such an encounter transpired? What would happen to my heart? What would happen to its boundaries? What would happen to its categories? What would happen to its imagination if I met a love that was that vast? What set of riches would I be willing to surrender? And I think those are the questions that we need to ask ourselves, because claim to serve that love. Yeah, but we clean it up and domesticate it, and we forget its power and its danger that we could be, you don't know what you're going to do if a love like this claims your heart. You
Well,
know,
we won't forget about it this Sunday because we are going to hear it proclaimed in all of its erotic glory from the pulpit. Is
I
this going to
hope
be the most erotic sermon ever preached at Riverside, too?
it might indeed be.
Well, now I think everyone's going to definitely be eager to see exactly how this turns out. So everyone watching, listening, you know how to find us on Sunday. We have Bible study starting at 9:30 in the morning. We'll look at this text and explore it in that setting. Worship starts at 11 a.m. Special music with the carillon and the organ that you know all too well. We'll begin at 10:30. So join us for worship. And then after worship, I think we get you for a sermon talk back. So we'll get to even dive in with the whole congregation, talking with you in the nave and online after the sermon to go even deeper. So it is going to be another fantastic Sunday at Riverside, as I think they all tend to be, but this one seems like it's going to be right at the top of that list as well. Dr. Thatamanil, we are grateful to have you make the long commute and join us for this coming Sunday. That's a joke. He has a very short commute. He lives at Union, and it is going to be a wonderful, wonderful day of worship, and this sermon in particular. Thanks for hanging out here to chat with us, and we look forward to talking with you more on Sunday.